I was a child of the 1980s horror explosion. At that age, I think I was into the original Chainsaw was a little bit heavy for me because it's not just a horror movie, it's also a suspense movie, like a deeply disturbing suspense movie. So I think it was a little bit too graphic for me in its like grossness. It wasn't Freddy cutting his fingers off and spraying blood and laughing, which I think is still my sensibility to this day. But the Chainsaw was always really like, if you wanted to go dark, that's where you went. I had started working in theater and wanted to work in movies from the time I was 12. So by the time Chainsaw 4 came around, I was a very grown-up 18 years old, and had worked on a couple of movies, and I'd worked a lot in theater, and I was just one of those guys that like I did everything I possibly could to not have a regular job. And when that movie came up, I don't even remember how I got the call about it. It may have been through the Texas Film Commission, which is how I got most of my calls. And I just went in and met with the production manager, and I wore the only shirt I had with buttons, and to try and make a good impression. Kevin Cathell. And she was looking for someone to build some specialty props because in the movie the lead villain, Vilmer character, had a mechanical leg. And so I brought in my portfolio with whatever stuff I had done, and interviewed with her, and she initially hired me to build a mechanical leg for like $300 or something. And then she said, well, because of course I wanted to make Leatherface, like that's what I showed up for. But she said, there's not really a lot of makeup effects in this movie. And I said, yeah, but I mean, someone's got to build this Leatherface mask, right? And she said, well, I mean, yeah, I guess. But she was really just kind of like, it didn't sound like there was going to be it was not going to be Chainsaw Massacre 2, which is what I sort of thought might be happening when I heard one of the original creators was going to be making another Chainsaw movie. So I mean, Chainsaw had been influential to me, and I was really into it. But I mean, the idea at that age to be able to have the opportunity to recreate one of the greatest horror icons of all time was astonishing. And so I put together a quote that I just wasn't sure. I thought it was too high, and the quote was something like $1,500 for the entire movie, including on-set labor. And after I heard the very smart production manager swallow once, she said, "When do you start?" So they gave me a shed in the back of the production office, which was like it was an old one of the old Austin downtown houses, and there was this shed in the back, and they gave that to me to be the makeup effect shop. And I just started doing life casts and doing sculptures and building the mechanical leg and everything. But I mean, to have that opportunity that young, having never really worked on a movie before, it was quite. I mean, I didn't actually, I think, feel the gravity of what was really happening because I had so little experience. So, the idea that I was able to do what I did, and I had been given like the responsibility to the horror community, which I had no concept of at the time. I mean, I would have been terrified to take the job if I had known what I was getting into. But, when you're young, you just kind of go along with it, and you kind of think, well, this must be the way it is. And so my first experience keying a movie was 18 years old on Chainsaw 4.
I went to University of Texas in Austin, where I studied radio, TV, film. I worked on a lot of graduate projects and got a lot of experience there. So I don't remember how it came to me, but I remember interviewing with the director, Kim Henkel. Working with Kim was really interesting. He was a writer. He was quiet, thoughtful, and his whole reason for creating this Chainsaw was to put things right, to get back to the true essence of the first one, that it might have been lost in the other remake.
Kim was definitely a great Texas character to meet. Like a gray-haired man with an epic mustache who talked real low and drove an old pickup truck. He had so many different plans and so many different ideas, and we rode to set a number of times, driving his big good old boy pickup truck, and this was like, an old clanker. Talking about the legacy of Chainsaw and his vision for the film, and it was really interesting to see how different Kim and Toby saw the movie that they had made together. The film community in Austin in the 90s was extremely vibrant and extremely diverse.
It was a small community, very dedicated community. Most of the crew had just come off of Dazed and Confused. and would go on to work on 11 and 45. We all kind of worked on the same films. This one was a little different because it was a horror film that had a lot of stunts in it.
We almost didn't look at film as a job. I mean, it was a job, but it was a way to express and create and make things, and so we all helped each other out on everything we were doing. You know, we all ran out and shot things on weekends, no matter what we were doing, and you know, you just get a call and be like, hey, I'm going to shoot this thing this weekend. You didn't even ask what it was about. It was just like, cool, I'll be there Saturday morning, we'll do it. There was never a problem shooting anything on property because people were like, wow, you want to shoot a movie here? Well, come on down. Like, it was so supported and enthusiastic and really inspiring, and I mean, it's a philosophy that I continue to carry with me into my film career.
We shot it mostly in Pflugerville. The main house was in Pflugerville. The prom was in Pflugerville. We shot in the woods at Bastrop, a lot of shooting in Bastrop. The conditions were great at the locations. They let us do what we wanted to do. The house especially was used for other films as well. Flesh and Bone was shot there. The location manager, Katie Kokonas, said that when she would go to places to try to get a location, and she would mention Chainsaw, people would get a really big smile on their face and then go, oh, you can have it for free. Chainsaw was a big deal to the Texans. First thing I did was watch the first Chainsaw again, and then I watched all the other ones that came after it, made mental notes of what I would not do. Things did not need to be all fresh and pretty and well lit. Props did not need to be clean. And then I went and found Robert Burns, who had art directed the first Chainsaw, and met with him, and we talked all about what his thought process was, why he chose what he chose, why he did what he did, because I really wanted it to have the feel and look like the first one, so if I could kind of get his mindset and adopt it to what I was doing at the time. We talked extensively about the meat hook. Jam Logan, our special effects guy, was very helpful in doing that. Had to figure out how to rig it and hang the girls so that they wouldn't get too hurt while they were up on a hook.
Vilmer's leg was a real interesting thing to build, especially coming from like a fabrication background and a makeup effects background. You know, I was used to making things that looked real but weren't necessarily actually real. And once we started filming with the leg, I realized that, you know, because I put little servos in there to make gears work and stuff, all that stuff got trashed on the first day because it wasn't built for Matthew McConaughey. And, you know, he is a very committed actor, and he doesn't let anything come between himself and the performance, even if that means ruining a prop along the way.
I try to put myself in the mindset of the characters when thinking about what props to have about and how things look. And considering that Vilmer was a tow truck driver who killed the people in the cars that he picked up, he would have an overabundance of keys. So I think Ann Iswell, the art director, she came up with the idea of putting all the keys on the wall or nailing them up on the wall.
The corpse in the bathtub. One morning we came in and the entire house just stunk so terribly. It smelled like rotting flesh. It smelled like, I don't even know what it was. And of course I got blamed for that, for, you know, using biological materials and, you know, that there's something in there rotting and something's terrible. It had turned out that someone had gotten very drunk and vomited into the tub with the dead body in it. And that's what was causing the terrible smell.
Where's the phone? I'm calling the cops.
Boy, you are as dull as ditch water.
Yeah, right.
This was an empty house, and Kim wanted it big and messy, and we had to fill it, and we didn't have a budget to buy anything. So I traveled far and wide around the county looking for people who give me stuff for free, looking at old storage spaces, walking across West Texas and looking for cattle bones. I went down to the local taxidermy place, Martinez Taxidermy, which is still there today. Told those fellows what I was doing, asked if I could have their leftover bones, which they thought was odd, but they took me to the back and there were piles of bones in the back, javelina jaws. They let me take as many as I wanted, and I would go back and replenish whenever they had more. We were moving so fast and there wasn't enough time, so the way I ran the department was if someone had a good idea or a better idea or an idea that we could put into play faster, we'd just go with whatever anyone had. And I remember my friend Frank Kozik thinking that the overstuffed chair should have some bone doilies. So he created these really cool looking bone doilies. One of them's over there. So we have bone chairs, but none of them were going to be as awesome and fancy and good looking and creative as the ones in the first one. I had heard that someone in town had one of the first bone chairs still in their possession. I found out who it was, went over and begged them to let me borrow it to fit in the scene and put Grandpa in it because he wasn't going to move much for somebody. And I brought it to the set and made it clear to everybody that this was an original chair, that I'd brought it here thinking, maybe hoping that some nerd would have noticed it in the first one and maybe see it in the second one and get all excited. And also to bring a little energy to the set. It's like, here we are, let's remember the goal. We're trying to make this be as, in the steps, in the lineage of the first one. And, told everybody to be careful with it. And of course the thing got knocked over and I almost had a heart attack and that was the situation. But everything was fine. It got it returned well and there was no problems, but still, you've got to be really careful when you bring a precious piece to a set, especially a set that has violence on it, for crying out loud. I did not know. I was not experienced enough to know that just don't even do that, ever.
Look, guys need sex, okay? It's bad for you to get all worked up and then not get it. You can get prostate cancer. Is that what you want?
Tyler Cohn was a good friend of mine from my just circle of friends who was thinking about getting into acting. I had just gotten the job on Chainsaw and he had heard that they were doing auditions, so I called Kim and said, hey, my buddy Tyler would be great for this character Barry because he is Barry. I mean, he's like the good happy-go-lucky version of Barry, but he's Barry. And so Kim saw him and cast him like almost immediately. So it was really fun to I got to work with one of my friends from just my general circle of friends. It was his first movie. He totally killed it and did an amazing job.
I propose to fight it out on this line if it takes all summer. That's Ulysses S. Grant. You probably didn't know that, did you? Of course you didn't.
I had known Joe Stevens from theater also. He had been either a director or a writer or an actor in several of the plays that I'd worked in as Zach Scott, so I already knew him. And he always ended up with some cool part in some movie that was coming through Austin. He'd always find some local character to inhabit, and so he was always really fun to work with. And Toni, I definitely knew of her, and she remained friends and was good friends with Andy, and everybody knew each other. It was really a family of people that had either all worked together before or had heard of each other and had wanted to work with. So just based in such a small film community in Austin, we were all able to, it was really fun to get to all work together on that one project. Robbie Jacks was a wonderful, kind, and deeply sad human being. He transcends actor. He was a personality. He was really just such an incredibly bright star that I think just always tried to look on the good sides of things, but he had a dark side, and when it flipped dark, it was dark. He ended up working with us, us was me and Andy Cockrum, who was my assistant on the movie. We made another movie right after that called The Trolls Bridge, and Robbie came out to help us out and played a part in the movie, and was just he was always so generous with his time, just a wonderful, interesting, funny human being, and we miss him very much. He was wonderful on set. I really cannot say enough about how wonderful he was with us.
Dear Robert Jacks was a very good friend before going into that. He was a singer and an actor. We all thought it was pretty funny that he was to play this particular role. J.M. Logan, he did cast of people's faces and created latex masks. There was one that was supposed to be for this dinner scene, because Leatherface liked to have different faces for different moods and different times. And there was supposed to be some pretty girl who was supposed to do it, and she did not show up. There was no one else to do it, and I'm standing there, I'm looking at JM, he's looking at me, and I'm like, all right, I'll do it. So did the plaster cast, of the face, but it was the boobs. That was the part that was whatever. He had to have a chest, and the chest girl didn't show up. So it's really funny to look at Robbie sitting there with my face on. He's a good friend of mine, like I said, and he knew how to mess with me. And so one day when we were eating during lunch break or dinner break or something, he's sitting next to me. He's like, "Oh, I'm so hot," because he had to keep some of this stuff on, and he took the clothes off, but he still had the chest sitting there. So I'm eating, and I'm looking over, and I'm like, "Oh God, I can't. Oh, Robbie, would you please just cover up? This is just so not cool for me to sit there and look at my boobs while I'm eating, you know." And then, oh, I shouldn't have said that, because of course then that's what he did all the time. But man, he grabbed it. He made it be something else. He added a gentler side to it, and I miss him.
All I can do is speak from, as a personal experience. Chainsaw Massacre 4 was one of the most important experiences I ever had as a film professional. It was the beginning. It was the first of a career that would go on for a long time, and hopefully will go on for a long time after. And it was my first impressions of what it was like to be on a real movie with a real crew that really knew what they were doing, to learn to improvise, to learn to push through hardship, to learn to work as a team. And as brutal as that experience was, I wouldn't change that for the world. It was a terrible, horrible experience. But it gave me a lot of values that I will carry with me for the rest of my life.
It's really weird to talk about it now, because I can even feel myself getting worked up about it, just talking about it, which is crazy. When you work on something and everybody gives 1,000%, every single person in every department, no matter how long they're on set or behind the scenes or in the pre-production, with everyone has a common goal. We had to do this right for the legacy. It was Chainsaw. How were we gonna fuck that up? I mean, we weren't gonna. So you pull off miracles daily. It feels great when everything goes right. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like working with that many people and having everyone be on the same page. By the same token, if you are on a project and nobody really cares and no one's doing their job and people aren't prepared, it can be the worst nightmare of your damn life. So I would say this was one of the best experiences